Now we're going to take a look at the second lab. So in the second lab, we're going to create 4 Windows Server 2022 Azure VMs and configure them for PS remoting with a PowerShell command called set AZ VM extension. So we're going to do something a little bit different in this script. We're going to use a for each loop. So what a for each loop is used for is to iterate through an array of objects. So in this case, our array of objects are the numbers 1 through 7. Each time we run this code, the first time it will be a 1, the second time it will be a 2, the third time it will be a 3. And so I'll just, for folks who aren't super familiar with loops, we'll just paste this in. And then you can see the first loop is running, the second loop is running, and then the third loop is running. So I, in this script, use the for each loop to name the groups and to create the virtual machines. So we already have AZ fund 01, so I made it x plus 1. So the first resource group that is created will be AZ fund 02 server 2022 will be our group, and then we'll get this nice status message that the first loop is running for the resource group. So we also use this x variable to define the virtual machine name. This way, on each iteration, the number will increase. So on the first round, it will be win-server 2022-01. The next loop will be 02, 03, and then finally 04. So we'll have 4 different computer names, 1 defined in each iteration. We're using the Windows 2022 data center image, and this time we're going to use the AZ, we're going to define the VNet in the AZ VM create command. So by default, it will create a 10.0.0/16 network. So if you create 2 default networks like that, you can't connect them together. So what I've done here is I defined a variable called octet, and it's 15 on the first iteration plus 1. It'll be 16 on the first iteration, 17, 18, and 19. And then I use it to define the VNet address space and the subnet address space. And I replace the second octet with the octet variable. That way, on each iteration, the subnet will increase. So we'll get a 172.17, 172.18.19, and .20. Then we'll create some network security group rules for RDP and SSH. And then we'll use the set VM extension set command, but we won't be using it to pull a shell script like we did with the Linux VM. Here, the parameter has you use this command to execute option. We're going to run PowerShell, and then all the commands we need to configure PS remoting. So we're going to do winrm quick config, enable PS remoting. We're going to set a firewall rule, and we're going to define the trusted hosts because these devices are not on the same domain or anything. They're basically like standalone servers on another network, so we have to define some of these trusted host and firewall rules. And then we will test the PS remoting. So in order for this to work, we will have to peer the networks together. So let's go ahead and copy and paste the code into the Cloud Shell. So when I write my scripts, I like to use the write verbose parameter so that it lets you know where you are in the script. So right here, we get this message that loop 1 is running for the resource group. And so when we come here, loop 1 is running for the name of the resource group. So one thing to keep in mind with these scripts, if the Cloud Shell were to fail, like if the web browser was closed or network connectivity dropped, you only get what gets applied is only as far as you get along in the script. So if you're halfway through your second iteration, that's as far as you get. You still get all those first configurations, but it won't continue after the Cloud Shell crashes. So let's take a look at our resource groups. Sometimes you have to click around to get it to refresh. Okay, and here is AZFun02-server 2022. So here is our resource group. It's got our server, our disk, our network security group, the public IP, the NIC, and the VNet. And then we'll get a nice message here in the Cloud Shell when the virtual machine is officially started. And so we'll take a look at the VNet. Okay, we can see that our virtual machine has started. We are now applying the network security group rules, and we are now using the set AZ VM extension set command. So just like in the Linux VM, you can actually come into the VM itself, go to settings and extension sets, and then see I named this one PS Remoting. Its status is unavailable, but it will change to transitioning and then succeeded. And then we'll also get a nice message here in the Cloud Shell. So while we're waiting, I was just going to show you the VNet. So this is the address space, the 172.16. And when we take a look at the subnet, it's the 172.16.0.0/24. And again, these extension sets, they can take anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes to apply. So I'm going to pause the recording while the extension set applies. Okay, the extension set has been applied. We get this nice message here. And then also if we hit refresh, we will get the provisioning has succeeded. So now it's moved on to the second iteration. So it ran through all the code, got to the bottom, and now it's going into the second iteration. So it's telling us we're in loop 2, and it's going to start creating the next virtual machine. So let's go back to our resource groups. Here is the third resource group. And now the resources are being created. So in order to have connectivity between these two VNets, we have to connect them. We essentially have two options. We have peering or creating a VPN connection. Since these VNets are in the same tenant, we are going to use peering. So I'm going to go into the first VM's VNet, WinServer 2022-01 VNet, and over here on the left we have an option called Peerings. We're going to create a peer. First, we're going to create a remote peer link. And we're going to go to the WinServer 2022-02 VNet. So we want to check these two boxes. We want to allow WinServer 2022-02 VNet to access the 01 VNet and to also receive forwarded traffic from the 01 VNet. And then we also need to create a local peer that allows 01 VNet to access 02 VNet and to also receive the forwarded traffic from the 02 VNet. So these other two options are if you are going to use an Azure service known as a virtual network gateway to create a VPN connection between the VNets. So we don't have the virtual network gateway, so we're not going to do that. And we're just going to stick with the standard peering. Okay, this looks great. We're going to hit add. So the progress on our other VM, it's been created. The ports have been opened, and now its extension set is being applied. So once the extension set has been applied, we'll be ready to test it. So we're going to go ahead and remote in to the first Windows server. So we're going to grab its public IP address. We're going to use the Windows Remote Desktop app. Okay, and we get this nice message here that the extension set has been applied and that it's moving on to the third iteration. So now it's creating the third resource group of Windows Server 2022 servers and creating that third 2022 server. So we're going to continue remoting into our machine here. So we paste the public IP address in there. We have the RDP port open, so we have the connection here. But we have to use the host name and the local username. So the local computer name is win-server 22-01/Windows admin 01. Type in our password. And we'll start our remote desktop session here. So one thing to note about Windows servers is by default, you can't ping them. So right now there is network connectivity with the peer between these two networks. If we try to test it with a ping, it would fail and we might think that there's no connectivity. But in this particular instance, we use the AZ VM extension set command to configure PS remoting. So even though the ping command is not going to work because the firewall rule is not configured, everything else for PS remoting has been configured and it will work. So the next thing we need is we need to get the local IP address of the other server. So I'll show you guys here. It's going to be this 172.17.0.4. We're going to open PowerShell. Okay, and then what we're going to do, so even though the ping command won't work, the enter PS session command will. So we will type in enter PS session 172.17.0.4, the credential, which is win server, SVR22-02 Windows admin 02. Type in our password. And now we have our PS session. So if I try to ping it though, it fails. So there is network connectivity through the peering, but we can't ping it. So what we're going to do is set the firewall rule to allow us to do this. And there's a few different ways you can do this. You can do it with PowerShell. I'm just using the classic netshell command. So now on the other server, win-svr2202, I configured the firewall for pinging. Try to ping, and the ping is successful. So that demonstrates how to set up the PS remoting between two different VNets using peering. So now while we were doing all of that, our Cloud Shell script was still running. It was iterating through the next loop, and then it went on to now we're on the final loop, the fourth and final loop, and it's creating the fifth server. It's created it, and now it's applying the VM extension set command. So when we come in here, we'll have this really nice naming convention for our groups. So they're all AZ Fund 01, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then these kind of specify that, hey, these are Windows Server 2022 servers. And then I'll just pause the recording right here, and then we'll wait for the extension set to be applied. And then we'll also come in here to settings, extensions, and then we'll also monitor it here where it has a status of transitioning. Okay, the last extension set has applied, and we've completed Lab 2.